Jean-Jacques Taylor, I was at the Star in Frisco, Texas, and talking to members of the Cowboys organization about how they had been trying to set themselves up from a personnel standpoint, from a culture standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, from a stylistic standpoint, set themselves up for San Francisco. The Eagles, they weren't worried about. They were more worried about beating San Francisco. That was last year. That was last season. That was before San Francisco took them out for a second straight season in the postseason. Now fast forward to today. Last night, everybody saw it on Sunday Night Football, 42 to 10, which for me only crystallized the huge gap between these two teams. Like, they're just not in the same weight class as San Francisco, and I think we all saw that last night.
You know what? I tweeted out at some point last night, and I can't remember when, that as I was watching the game, I started thinking, this really reminds me of Spence versus Crawford. You thought it was going to be this great fight, and I'm a Spence guy. Spence is my guy. He's from DeSoto. I used to live in DeSoto for 20 years. But as the fight grew on, you're just like, this is not a fight. He getting beat up, and it's just a matter of when he gonna get knocked out, and it hurts. And so when you watch the Cowboys last night, it started early because the first drive you like it should be more difficult, and then they go 3 and out a couple times, and it didn't take long to realize that even once they cut it 14-7, they were getting blown up on the line of scrimmage. And the simplest game of football is if you can't win the line of scrimmage, you have no chance. And they couldn't win it on offense, they couldn't win it on defense. And that meant they had no chance. So, yeah, it's they got to reevaluate because ain't no time for a pity party, but they got to reevaluate because that wouldn't hurt. They built that thing up in their mind, and then to get beat up and beat down like that, I'm sure that was a lonely flight home.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like it's going to leave a mark because, you come into it feeling like you got all the pieces in place. You come into it feeling like you got the talent. Like this time is going to be different. I know at least Dan Quinn was dressed in black. I think somebody else might have shown up dressed in black. Little did they know they were dressing for their own funeral. It just feels like there's this physical and mental hurdle when it comes to San Francisco that, I mean, I guess if we had the answers, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But, like, how do they get over it at this point? Because they may see him again in the playoffs, and I got no reason to believe it'll be any different.
No, well, physically, and again, I don't know why I was into my boxing
Let's do
stuff last night, but I was like, it seems to me like, and this was the first quarter and a half, that San Francisco was really doing the Mike Tyson. They were tackling with bad intentions. I mean, they just seemed very physical in their hitting.
Yeah.
I mean, just everything was like, bam. And they were bringing it. And while the Cowboys had some moments, they just never seemed like they were into it. They seemed like they were overwhelmed really from the start. And it looked like a bad high school game or a bad college mismatch where you just like, this other team has no shot. And I really was surprised because, the Cowboys had built it up all week. They had talked the talk. They had prepared, but then there was nothing. I was talking to a source within the organization on Friday, and I said, hey, how you feeling? What you think? And this guy looked at me and he said, well, I feel good about it. I know that they're ready. Everybody I talked to feels ready. He said, my only concern is if they lose, is it going to be a hangover because they put so much into it? Now, I got to tell you, I was thinking, if they lose 24-20, 21-17, I had no idea they was going to lose 42.
Losing like that.
So,
yeah.
That's a whole other thing, man. It requires a great deal of mental resolve and fortitude to bring that thing back this week and go back out to LA and deal with the Chargers and Kellen Moore this week.
So, and the thing about it is, it's not just this week, because even the totality of this season, or at least 5 games worth, it's like they look like the best team in the league after beating up on both New York teams, after beating up on Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson. But the
Right.
Cardinals gave them that work. They beat the Patriots, who, as you texted me yesterday, Patriots got problems, bro. But we're going to focus on the Cowboys here. They beat the Patriots.
Right.
And then they come back and get curb stomped by San Francisco. And so, who are these Dallas Cowboys?
Right now, they're a team that dismantles bad teams, Cardinals notwithstanding. And the one good team, they got stomped on, as you said. Now, here's the thing. They got the Chargers coming up. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but they got the Eagles coming up. They're going through a tough stretch where, and this is why I said what I said, which is they don't have time for a pity party. Because if you sit there and feel sorry for yourself, you'll be on a losing streak real soon. And nobody wants to see that if you're Dallas, because there's such expectations this year about what they can do and how they can get it done.
Mm-hmm. All right, you know what? I'm going to do something that's not very smart. I'm going to go ahead.
Oh?
I'm going to write the Cowboys off. I'm going to just do it right now. I'm just going. I mean, it's like there's a long season. It's a long season. A lot of games to be played. A lot of things can happen. It matters when you're playing your best football. It matters if everybody's healthy. Yada yada yada. But just this team doesn't seem any different than previous iterations of Cowboys teams that have had a lot of talent, a lot of glitz and glamour around it. A lot of Pro Bowlers, a lot of All Pros, and yet. A lot of money. As a great writer once said, the best team that money can buy amounts to Confederate currency when it comes time to be counted. That's what it feels like when it comes to these Dallas Cowboys. As a matter of fact, going back to before last season, I referenced last season when I was there during the regular season. I remember being in Oxnard at training camp. I saw you at training camp. And you were trying to tell me that, like, hey, man, don't get too excited about what you're seeing out here. I've seen this movie before. As somebody who's covered this team for, 30 years?
Yeah. I was going to say, 1995, their last trip to the Super Bowl was my first year. And, I don't get shocked often by them. I was shocked by that performance last night. And it's because if you just break the game down to its least common denominator, you go, okay, my boys against your boys. So my boys are Dak Prescott, 154 yards, 3 picks and a touchdown. CeeDee Lamb, 4 insignificant catches for 49 yards. Micah Parsons, 1 quarterback pressure. Their guys who were supposed to lead them didn't show up. They didn't do anything. Whereas you look at San Francisco's guys, Fred Warner, Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, they all showed up and showed out and did their thing. And at the end of the day, I mean, it was just a no contest.
So where does it start? I mean, whether it's fixing it in the short term or the long term, because this team is the NFL's embodiment of the definition of insanity. It does the same thing over and over every year, expecting a different result. Where does it start with Dallas in terms of fixing it?
Oh, that's a deep question. And here's why it's a deep question. Now, let's tell the truth. Mike McCarthy got Kellen Moore fired. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think this might be my last year. I want to call the plays if it's going to be my last year. I want to go out on my terms if it's going to be my last year. So you got the Mike McCarthy issue. Like, it hasn't really been about the regular season for the Cowboys this year. It's always been about what do you do in the playoffs. So I don't really think Jerry Jones cares how they get into the playoffs, wild card, whatever, as long as we get in and we get to the NFC Championship game. However you get there, I don't care. Just get there. I need to see progress. And so you ask yourself, if there's not progress, what's going to happen? And it might be that Mike McCarthy gets fired. The only problem with that is if they don't have the season that you expect them to have and you fire Mike McCarthy, well, who's the next coach? Well, all of us who cover the team closely would say it seems to be a no-brainer. Dan Quinn would be the next coach. But I'm telling you, if you don't have the season that you thought you were supposed to have, then Dan Quinn is probably part of some of that bad play. So can you sell him as the head coach? Now, it is Jerry Jones, so, at some point, he don't really care about whether I can sell him because I can sell anything to anybody. And then the final part of that question, Doug, is okay, whatever you do with the head coach, what do you do with the quarterback? Because he's now in his ninth, he'll be going into his 9th year. Okay.
He is who he
History
is.
says if you ain't done it by now, you're not gonna do it. But I'm telling y'all, and I tell people this all the time, and as you as I don't know, you still rep the Saints?
No, that's a long story.
Okay,
but no, I rep New Orleans, but not the Saints. So go ahead, have at
it. Okay. So this my point is, you can say get rid of Dak Prescott. You can be like, I'm done with Dak Prescott. Screw him.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I got no problem with that if you want to say that. The problem is when you get off and you start on the quarterback journey, you can be like the Cowboys who go from Tony Romo to Dak Prescott. You can be, Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck. You can be Brent Favre to Aaron Rodgers. Or what's behind door number 2? You could be them Miami Dolphins that went about 30 years till they find Tua, and they hope that he don't get a concussion, or they may be back on that journey. You could be the Jets. They ain't had one since Broadway Joe. You could be the Browns. They ain't had one since Otto Graham. You could be the Lions. Jared Goff ain't really in that thing. He's serviceable. He's solid. But what I'm saying is, and it don't matter, Doug, whether you take him at the first pick of the draft, there's no guarantee once you get on that journey how long you're going to be on that journey.
They took one at 3, and that's the last pick of the draft that hit. Okay, so you said love the one you with. I see where you're going with this. Sounds like you're one of those people that, like, you don't miss what you have until it's gone. You know, you better appreciate what you have in Dak Prescott because you don't want to know how the other side lives. Huh? That's what all your exes say?
That's what all my exes say.
But see, I was gonna hit you with I could do bad all by myself though. You know what I'm saying? Like if this is what we're gonna get, says Cowboys fans, and you know what, man? Like let's just try something new for the sake of change's sake, if nothing else. Because my read on Dak Prescott, I love your general read on I said Dak who he is. I love to know who you think, having watched his whole career and having watched his predecessors in Dallas. So you got a lot of comps just in terms of the QBs that wear the star on their helmet. Who is Dak Prescott? I maintain that he's not a guy that will be the reason you lose games or the reason you don't win, but he also is not going to be the reason that you do win, which goes back to the Cowboys beating up on bad teams but getting beat up by good teams, which makes them collectively average. Both Dak is a microcosm of the team. Like he's above average. He's good, but he's not going to be the guy that carries you where you got to go. He'll be more along for the ride. He's not going to be baggage, but he's along for the ride.
I can't really argue with you right now because I think he's regressed in the last year and a half. Like I thought he was on an ascent 2 years ago. But I didn't see it last year. And the start of this year has been wonky, which is my new favorite word. Just because there are moments where he looks good. There's moments where he looks confused. He doesn't look confident the way I've seen him look in the past. Meaning I know where I'm going with the ball, boom, 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 and I'm very decisive with it. Like they haven't taken very many deep shots. I think he's trying to fit into Mike McCarthy's offense. And it's just I can't, I'm not sure if people put me on the Dak defender part of the conversation, but it's hard for me to ride for him like I used to just because I haven't seen it in a minute. And, in the NFL, it doesn't take long because what's the famous thing? NFL stands for not for long. And so you only have so many years not to get it done and look like you're regressing before folks decide you are regressing and it's time to move on.
Because they got to address his contract. They got to address his contract like this offseason, correct?
Yeah, he got Todd France, the agent, he did the damn thing on the contract. They got no trade, okay. You can't franchise me, okay. So that means you got to come to me. You got to deal with me. And all these quarterbacks, the money. You can say, well, Dak is not Joe Burrow, so he doesn't need $52 million. Okay, fine. I'll take 4 years and $47 million. I'm good. Since I've already got 4 years and $40 million in the bank. And the question is, do you want to invest that in a guy who hadn't proved he can take you over the hump? Because what'll happen is we're going to be in year 9 and you've got 2 playoff wins. And, that's the same as Tony Romo, but this is Dallas. We judge people based on Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach. You need 2 rings, you need 3 rings. And so he's got no rings and nothing close. And so, and you ask yourself, do we need to pay somebody $150 million when the odds and the history says at this age, they're not going to get it done?
Right. Because that's you brought up the person I was going to ask you about. Like, it feels very similar to his predecessor. Maybe it's a tradition unlike any other in Dallas, where it's like, how much of it is it on the quarterback? Well, he's doing more with less, he's underrated. He's actually underrated. A lot of people say he's overrated, but the truth is he's underrated if you peel back the layers of it. That was the conversation around Tony Romo and how much Romo had to overcome and Romo had to carry. But regardless, they never got where they thought they could go with those talented Cowboys teams. How similar and how different is Dak Prescott's arc? I mean, one was undrafted, took over for Drew Bledsoe. The other one was a 4th-round pick, took over for Tony Romo. So neither of them came through the front door, if you will. And both of them have been polarizing. How similar and how different are their career arcs?
At the end of the day, the way it's going, their career arcs are going to be very similar. It's really good quarterbacks who couldn't quite get it done. And, the weird thing is, like the Cowboys have this stretch of 28 years without having been to the NFC Championship game, where everybody else in the NFC has been there at least twice, except for Washington and Detroit. Mm-hmm. And when we say, just talking straight football, I mentioned Washington and Detroit. You say those are 2 of the worst teams over the last 40 years in the NFL, so I get why they haven't been. The problem with Dallas is, and it did this for Romo and it did this for Dak, is they should have been either Super Bowl or NFC Championship bound in 07, 14, and 16. They were clearly the best team in the NFC those years and somehow managed to snatch defeat from victory. And so they didn't get it done, and that's why we got this long stretch. And so Dak is a lot more loved in the locker room than Romo was. Romo is a good dude. He really is, but he's an aloof dude. And so he didn't really fit in with his teammates. Dak fits in with everybody. Dak like country music. He like hip hop. He can hang out with the white guys. He can hang out with the brothers. He can hang out with the high draft picks. He can hang out with the practice squad dudes. Romo hung out with the head coach and Jason Witten. That's it for the most part.
Right.
And that's no shade. That's just what it is. That's who your crowd is. So Dak is a lot more beloved. And I tell people that, and people can sniff and go, I don't know. When Tony Romo was your starter for 9 years and lost his job, you tell me who you saw say, that is wrong to give that man's job to a rookie. I'll wait, because ain't nobody say that. One, his BFF, Jason Garrett, gave his job away. And his other BFF, Jason Witten, was like, dog, I wish I could say something, but I can't. Because we on a roll right now. So I think Dak has always been a better leader. He's been more beloved in the locker room. But at the end of the day, they both got 2 playoff wins, none of which was the biggest game that they could, And so they're both going to have all the passing records by the time their careers are over. They're both really good. But in Dallas, unlike New Orleans, where y'all still pining for Archie Manning, in Dallas, where it's about Super Bowls, it don't cut it here.
So okay, listen, I told you I don't rep the Saints, I rep New Orleans, and I could tell you the story. But what you can't do as somebody who just, like, as you said, has gone 30 years without an appearance in the NFC Championship game, what you can't do is slander a team that has won the Super Bowl in the interim, okay? Because the Saints, under a guy named Drew Brees, okay, Texas's own Drew Brees, did actually win a Super Bowl. See, now you bringing out the New Orleans in me. Because, I quit that narcotic known as the New Orleans Saints back in 1993 when for the second consecutive season, they blew a home playoff win. See, I'm too young to remember the Aints. I didn't wear bags on my head. Right. That was my parents and my grandparents. But I came up in the Houdat. I came up as a Houdat, as Houdats and Cha-Ching and the late 80s, early 90s, the Jim Mora, Jim Finks days, Bobby Hebert, John Fourcade. That was the team I grew up rooting for until Clark High School's own Michael Haynes and the Atlanta Falcons came into the Superdome and won a 1992 playoff game after the Saints won their first division title in team history in 1991. Having only made the playoffs for the first time and been a winning team for the first time in 1987. Followed by 1992, when they went 12-4, had a home playoff game to Randall Cunningham and the Philadelphia Eagles, led 20-3 at halftime. Jean-Jacques led 20-3 at halftime. The final score was 36-20.
Wow.
So it was in that moment. Okay? It was in that moment. And this is kind of full circle. I don't know if I ever told you this. Circa 1991, I remember watching, this was old school Thursday. I feel like it was a Thursday night, old school Thursday night football, like on TNT or something.
All right.
I remember watching Michael Irvin give the guy that we're going to talk about in a minute, who you know all about, or you writing a book about, or you wrote a book about. I read the excerpt, won't get into that. I remember watching Michael Irvin give Deion Sanders the business, slant route after slant route in primetime television. And I'm like, yo, I'm feeling this Cowboys team. Like, they got Emmett in 90. I got Troy Aikman's football car when they took him number 1 out of UCLA. I'm like, Irvin is. I like his swagger. I was like, I'm Jimmy Johnson. I'm like, okay, let me get with the Cowboys. They went 11-5 in 1991. Of course, 92, 93 to win the Super Bowl. You know the whole history. So interestingly enough, I would say I was because I became a Cowboys fan in my teenage years. I actually rooted for the Cowboys. I stopped rooting for anybody because you and I, being OG journalists that we are, when I got into the business, I couldn't root for anybody. I couldn't be a fan. I couldn't show up in a locker room in an Aikman jersey or Marino jersey or Bledsoe jersey. Like how'd that look,
Right.
But I was actually a Cowboys fan growing up. So that's the story. So when you say, do I rep the Saints? No, but I am about facts. And the Saints have been far more successful in recent years than the Dallas Cowboys have. That's how we got on that. But in terms of the future of this franchise, okay, and I'm going to reference an excerpt because you referenced Mike McCarthy getting Kellen Moore fired, taking over play call and saying, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out on my terms, which dovetails into, I read this excerpt from your forthcoming book, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and the Making of Men by Jean-Jacques Taylor, from Mariner Books, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers. This was an excerpt on SI.com. And I love the story about how Deion back in 89 at old RFK Stadium, which I just drove past, they were going up against, his Falcons were going up against the Washington franchise. And he played off coverage against Art Monk, got burned for a touchdown. That was the call. That's the call. And he went with the call, looking in the backfield, got burned for a touchdown. Right. He said, I ain't never doing that again. He's like, I'm bumping. And he said, if you're going to get me, you're going to get me my way. You're not going to get me your way. And he talked about at Jackson State and now at Colorado, if this program ain't going to succeed, it's going to be my way. So before we get deep into Deion and what he's doing at Colorado, I mean, there got to be whispers about Deion in Dallas, right? Like, is that not a Jerry Jones move to write Deion another big check and pull him out of Colorado and have him inject an energy into the Cowboys franchise that they have not had since, I don't know, Jimmy Johnson?
Let me see. I think it would do all of those things. But I've talked to Deion numerous times about this before it even became a topic. And he's always said, and I'm going to tell you a story, he's never had any interest in coaching the NFL. And that's because he goes, and you have to be around him enough to understand his mannerisms and stuff. But he'd be like, dog, I'm not going to coach people that don't want to play. You make $20 million, you don't want to play. And what you got to understand is Deion is a cool dude. Most of the time, he's a fairly relaxed dude. He likes to fish. I mean, that's a relaxing thing. But you understand that fight he had with Andre Rison, okay? Everybody saw that. They throwing blows out there on the field. He was telling me the story one time, and it gets into why he would never coach in the NFL. He was telling me a story one time about they're in a meeting, And I don't think this was Dallas. I think this was the Falcons. It might have been San Francisco. It might have been San Francisco. They're in a meeting, and whoever the DC or secondary coach is like, hey, on this coverage, prime, you do this, safety, you do that. He look at the safety. Nah, bro, you do this because I'm going to do that. And the guy just goes, nah. And so they go back and forth. And in the game, the guy did what the coach said. Now, he didn't get beat for a touchdown or a big play. He almost got beat for a big play. So it happened a couple times. So they in the film session the next week looking at it. And he said, Doug, I thought I told you, da-da-da. And the guy said something. And before he knew it, Deion put his hands on him. And he's trying to box him up. And that's my point is he couldn't play in the NFL because guys will be doing that all the time. Where in college, you got a certain control, a certain respect level. They'll do what you tell them to do. And he not built for the pros, man. He wants to teach guys how to play the game. He wants to teach guys how to be adults. And he just ain't built for the NFL game, man. Plus, he likes guys to work. And if you want him cats that don't want to practice and don't want to work, he would be fighting you because he would get that frustrated.
Physically. But all right, look.
Get that frustrated.
Okay, so A, I'm not going to tell Deion how to think.
Right.
I'm not going to tell somebody who knows Deion as well as anybody and yourself what Deion should think. But, I mean, it feels like, is he saying that because the right opportunity hasn't come or he's focused on the task at hand? And the only reason I say that is this. If anybody could resonate with the modern athlete, it's a dude that they all idolize. Like, I might be being naive, I don't think Deion would have a problem getting contemporary athletes to follow his lead. Like, he's a Pied Piper. Like, everybody want to touch the hem of this dude's garment. It's the same reason why these college players are flocking to him. The same reason why celebrities are flocking to him. Everybody listens to Coach Prime. And so is he worried about people being him? Well, they one but one Deion. So I don't know if you know what it reminds me of, Jean-Jacques? It reminds me of like when you was a player back in your day, and then you grow up and you have kids and you have daughters, right, and then that karma comes around. Is Deion worried about like the karma of the modern rich athlete coming around to bite him in the ass? Because I would not put it past Deion Sanders to be able to step in any NFL locker room and command their attention.
No, I just think, number one is, now I got to make sure I say this right because it's a nuanced statement. Mm-hmm. He's not driven by money. He likes money, but he's not driven by money. There's no check you can write Deion that will change his lifestyle. There's just, his lifestyle is his lifestyle. Now, I could write you a check. I don't know, you've been a sports host now, so I can write you a check for maybe 15, 20 million a year, and that might change your lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
That's not changing Deion's lifestyle, okay? His lifestyle is his lifestyle. So money. What
about just competing on the highest level? What about just proving that and going back to Dallas and doing it for the star, which hadn't won it since he was there?
Well, I think that sounds good, but really, I'm telling you, why does a guy like Deion coach 7 and 8 year olds for 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 years after his playing days are over? He really likes giving back to kids and shaping kids. Why? You have to go back to how he grew up. Child of a single parent till he was about 8 or 9. Dad in his life, but a drug addict. So he was in his life, out of his life. And so who are the most influential people in his life? They were all the coaches he had growing up. Dave Cable at the Fort Myers Rebels. Ron Hoover at North Fort Myers High School. Mickey Andrews at Florida State. He looks at how they changed his entire life. And not just his life, the generations that came from him. And he says to himself, I can do that for other kids. I don't know which kids, but there's a kid on his staff right now, a guy named Rashad. He's a grad assistant. Rashad played high school football in Dallas. He got to be friends with this kid playing at SMU named Bucky. Bucky and Rashad and 3 other guys used to go to Deion's house in the summer and hang out there all day every day, all summer. Why? Because Bucky was Deion's son, is Deion's son. Deion Sanders Jr., nicknamed Bucky. Well, I'm talking to Rashad, and he's at Jackson State. I don't know their relationship. He's waxing poetic about Coach Prime. He's like, he saved my life. I'm like, Dog, what are you talking about? So he says, oh, well, I used to hang out with Bucky. We used to go there every summer. He said there was 5 of us, 3 of them in jail. The only one that ain't in jail, me and Bucky. And so those are the types of things that drive him and motivate him and have him working with kids, because he sees the lives that he can change at the beginning. And when you change the lives of young men, you change, much like his life, you change generations, because the kids that they have fathers in their lives, have fathers who are productive, who have fathers doing things. And it's a big deal to him, and it's an important thing to him.
You know, that's deep. And it's got me to thinking. Because, you know, I mean, I don't have a relationship with Deion, but nonetheless, that relationship lately has been complicated because, and you and I never talked about this, but I wasn't critical of him leaving Jackson State. I was disappointed that he left Jackson State because, again, not knowing him the way you do, I was under the impression, so that's my fault, that he was basically becoming a modern-day Eddie Robinson and was there for the long haul, that he was going to be at Jackson State, and that, you know, getting the Travis Hunters of the world, like there was a movement that he was creating at Jackson State that basically was like, you know, their ice ain't colder. Like, you don't have to go to the PWIs. You don't have to go to the Power Fives. Like, we could do it big here at Jackson State, and we could bring HBCUs to the forefront. And I thought that movement was going to last longer than it did. It's not up to me how long it lasts. That's up to God. That's up to Deion. But I was disappointed, not in him, but that he left. And I think there is, talk about nuance, I think there's nuance there. Having said all of that, I got 2 Colorado hoodies that my wife brought me back from Boulder when she went. Like, I can also root for Deion Sanders to do what he's doing at Colorado. So what you said just now about his motivations and how they may not align with what we think would be cool for him, it kind of like, it kind of convicted me, if you will. And it kind of gave me like, it was a full circle kind of closure, because it's like, just like I thought, again, who the hell am I, that he should have or would have stayed at Jackson State longer than he did. Well, okay, that's not what he was in it. That's not what he wanted to do. Likewise, just because I think it's cool, it would be cool for him to coach in the NFL or coach the Cowboys. Well, that ain't what he in it for. Like you just broke down. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. And, you know, at one level, he's a very simplistic dude. At another level, he's very complicated. But, you know, his vision is always for kids. And he's very hard on them at one level, but at another level, he'll give a kid, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 chances until there's just, I've literally exhausted it. Like, do this and you can't do this. And then the guy comes in and says, well, coach, I'm sorry. It's me. I'll do better. Well, he almost always gives those people another chance, those kids another chance, because ultimately he's in it for kids. And, you know, and he starts every team meeting, whether you think he should or not, with somebody pray us up. And then, you know, kind of a daily, you know, thing about life, how to succeed in life. Sometimes it applies to football. Sometimes it doesn't. But the goal is to always get these guys thinking about how they can be contributors to society as well as the team. And hopefully we can win a bunch of football games and you know, graduate a bunch of kids who contribute to society in the same way. That's the goal. So
you covered him. How'd y'all get tight?
I tell young journalists all the time, man, I'm gonna go just a little bit deeper with you. But the way you cover people and the way you build relationships is you have to understand what people are all about. You have to figure out why they are the way they are. And sometimes you can do that by listening. Sometimes you do it by observing. And so I wanted to do a Deion story. I ain't gonna lie. Why? Because at that point in my career, I was very young. You know, I said the general track in our business back in that day was you graduate, you cover high schools, you cover colleges, then maybe if you're lucky, you end up on a pro beat.
Right.
Well, I went straight from the NBA. I went straight from high school to the NBA. I went straight from high schools to covering the Cowboys, which is insane, really. And
especially in that market.
That's what I'm saying. And so,
yeah,
you know, to give perspective, you know, Ed Werder, who people see on ESPN all the time, he's my first partner on the Cowboys. You know, and so I wasn't sure how to break stories. I used to call my friends, "How you break a story, man? Just work hard." And I'm working hard. Well, then you should be able to break some stories soon. Couldn't. And literally, man, I had a meeting with my boss who basically said, if you can't do something on this beat, we're going to move you off of it. Now, I'm like I said, I jumped from high schools to the Cowboys. I've only been doing it a year, and you're already talking about taking me off. And the point of this is I decided at that moment, all the guys, because Cowboys had a fair number of people who didn't talk. I just decided all the guys who don't talk, I'm going to get them to talk to me. And that was guys like Charles Haley and Eric Williams and Leon Lett. And if you could ever break through with one of them, you could get them all because they'd be like, well, Leon Lett don't talk to nobody. Nobody.
Mm-hmm. He must be all right.
He must be all right.
Yeah.
Or you get them to co-sign, hey, dog, go tell your boy I just want to holler at him about this. And so I started doing it. So what I'm getting to with Deion is I noticed that if you want to do a Deion story, there was one way to get it done. And so I walked over to him one day and I said, hey, dog, and before he could shoo me away, I said, hey, man, I know you leading the league in punt return. I really don't want to talk to you about that at all. I want to talk about the 10 guys blocking for you. And he was like, oh, okay, sit down. And he filled up the notebook as he would. I mean, we went through every guy. What's he supposed to do? Why is he good? He filled up the notebook. I wrote the story. I took it to him because the internet wasn't really popping back then. Took it to him a couple days later.
You have to physically mail it to him.
And I said, hey, dog, here's the story I wrote. And whenever he saw me the next time, he said, hey, that was a good story. Anytime you need me, come holler at me. And so that's kind of how it started. And it just continued over the years from that. Once he retired, he lived in Dallas, so I'd see him here or there. Hall of Fame come up, I did a couple stories. He's always in the news for something or other doing with sports. So I might pop out and do a story. And so I just was seeing him all the time. And then I got involved with Jackson State. ESPN called me and said, hey, we know you got a relationship with Deion. Any chance you could write a story? And I said, well, I didn't talk to him about a year. Let me see if his number worked. Well, his number didn't work because athletes do what, man? Change their numbers all the time.
Change their number. But they don't change their email, though.
No, this is true. But I did what any self-respecting father in Texas would say. I called ESPN and said, hey, I just checked it out. My son's football team plays his team in 2 weeks. I'm going to get to the game early, and I'll go down on the field before the game and holler at him. And that's exactly what happened. He came out, he saw me, dapped me up. Hey, where you been? Blah, blah, blah. Got the new number. And I said, hey, man, ESPN wants to do a story. You down? He's like, yeah, call me whenever. And it just kind of started from there, man. And Sports Illustrated reached out to do a cover story on him last year. And literally 2 days after that, the people at HarperCollins called and said, hey, we've been looking for somebody to write a Deion book for 2 years about what he's doing at Jackson State. Can you handle it? So I called him and said, hey, what you think? Here's what they think. Here's what I'd like to do. What you think? And he was basically like, I got you, man. Whatever access you need, you can have. Go do your thing.
Wow. And as president of the JJT Media Group, as you say, if you need it written, the JJT Media Group can write it. But no, that's fascinating. And that's journalism 101. Like young reporters take note. When they zig, you zag. And next thing you know, Deion Sanders, the greatest of all time, is giving you the inside story from a different angle, which I could appreciate. But that's the way you've moved for 30 years, though. So the book. Like, take me inside the process of the book. And
it's really interesting because
you've kind of teased it because you said it's titled Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and the Making of Men. So it sounds like the message is going to be along the lines of what you explained about his motivations.
And at one point, it's really the quest for perfection because they were working toward a perfect season until the last game. But I've written a couple other books, but they was more like you put a bunch of feature stories together and they end up in a book. They don't really have a story arc to them, so this was a little different. And I hadn't done it before, although I've read a lot of books because I'm a reader. And so I got into it and I sent my editor, I said, I don't really know what I'm doing. So let me send you the approach that I'm taking. And you tell me how you feel about it. And I sent it to her and she was like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. Do it like that. And so basically, I go week by week through Jackson State's season. And throughout the course of the season, there's a lot of ebb and flow, highs and lows, but I take you into the players. So say like they're in Memphis playing Tennessee State and Alejandro Mata, who had the big kick for Colorado the other day to beat Arizona State at the buzzer. Well, he kicked 3 field goals against Tennessee State. So during that chapter, I'm talking about the game, but when there's a moment for him, I dip out and for about, in your lingo and my lingo, 1,000, 1,500 words, I tell you his story, how he didn't have any offers until Jackson State called him, how he was in the middle of a chemistry test when they said, hey, we got a coach from Jackson State who wants to see you, how he kicked the game-winning field goal in the high school to win the state championship. And when I finished all that,
not Deion on national TV telling him to dance.
Yes. And so I dip back and then I go back and forth and tell you the stories of the kids and their trials and their tribulations and their triumphs and their victories in their lives as they're part of this Jackson State program that's trying to win a championship and go undefeated. And there's some funny stories in there, but there's a lot of poignancy in there, man, because again, I teach a class at SMU, but I deal with a lot of young journalists, and what I tell them all the time is, everybody got a story. Literally, everybody got a story. I got a story. I just told you a little piece of it. You got a story. We all got stories. It's just that most people don't care. And so when you start talking to people and you say, I'm really interested in your story, how you get to Jackson State, that's when you end up talking to a guy who's a classic, this guy named Hayden Hagler. Open up his mouth, you'd have swore he was black. And so you ask him, how you get to Jackson State? And he says, I said, because you transferred from Marshall. He said, well, it's always about something bigger than me. I went to Marshall because, those people, that city rallied behind the people that died in that plane crash. So I'm looking at him like, okay, dog, you like 20 years old. Why is that?
Yeah, you different. Yeah.
Well, I lost 3 brothers. And so I wanted a community that would be behind me like that. I said, you lost 3 brothers? He said, yeah. And so I'm like, because we're talking on the practice field because he had broken his foot, so he had some time. I said, dog, was it like an accident, a fire or something? He said, no, it's 3 separate incidents. And I was like, my God. So he tells me the story of how his brothers died. And so when he drops the game time pass in the Celebration Bowl and social media is talking about, why is this white boy in an HBCU, da-da-da-da-da-da, and he's getting death threats and stuff, all I can think of is they don't know his story. Yeah. They don't know the resiliency this kid has to come back from your 3 brothers dying. Your mama's so grief-stricken that you become homeless because she can't keep a job, and you living in your car for a year. All that's in the book, but that's his story. And so those are the stories I tried to tell about the people playing the game as Jackson State's on this quest for perfection and Deion's trying to change the game. And I loved it, man. It was great getting to know these cats and trying to shed a light on what they're all about. My only regret is, and it sounds crazy, you write almost 300 pages and you're like, I wish I could have written 4 because there's some people who had some great stories that they didn't fit into the different games or the different weeks. And so you couldn't use it, or this Colorado storm came out of nowhere, kind of. And so the stories that you might have told, you had to spend that time talking about Colorado and why he's there
Right.
and the work that he's doing there.
The stories within the stories, it sounds like what we're going to get from Deion Sanders and the making of men. I guess just to connect to what you said about Deion. Now, when you were a young reporter, you said, hey, I know you lead the league in punt returns, but I want to talk about the 10 guys blocking for you. That was the end. Now, the end, I beg your pardon, I-N, that was the end. Now, 3 decades later, Deion, like, I got you, whatever you need. Was there a conversation with Deion, though, about you taking this approach to the book, fittingly making the book about the kids and making the book about the other people that helped to make him successful at Jackson State? Or was that just automatic for you based on you knowing him, but also just how you're wired as a reporter and as a storyteller? You understand what I'm saying? Because there's a connection there. What Deion is about, that's what this book is about, it sounds like.
I really, again, not having done it before, I really wasn't sure what to do. I just went in and I basically, I live in Dallas. I basically picked up and moved to Jackson for 6 months because I knew the only way to do it was to be there basically every day. I came back to Dallas a few times. I basically lived in Jackson. And so what happened is probably the turning point is, again, I'm just kind of observing, but just like I talked to Hayden, I talked to several players, and my first question was always, how'd you get to Jackson State? Because the real talk is there was nobody's destination point except for very few players. And in listening to those stories, inevitably they would tell me something about Deion. One story, real quick, is about this quarterback named Gunner, white kid from Dallas, right outside of Dallas. Hey Gunner, how you get to Jackson State? Oh, Coach Prime came. I played on one of his 7-on-7 teams with Shador. I said, oh, how did that go down? And he's telling me, he said, well, I was on the team, but I didn't really know Coach Prime. I was on the team, but he had several teams. And each team had 2 quarterbacks. One's supposed to play half the game, the other kid's supposed to play the other half. Well, he saw that the coach didn't put me in one game. And so he came and grabbed me after the game and said, hey, I see that you didn't get to play. I'm sorry. You're supposed to play half. I don't know why this coach didn't play you. Don't worry about it. I'm going to put you on my team with Shador. Then you don't have to worry about whether you're going to get your half of the game anymore. Then he called his daddy and told him the same story. Gunner gets home. Daddy says, hey, talk to Coach Prime today. I want to talk to you about it. And Gunner's like, oh, my God, what did I do? What kind of trouble am I in? And Daddy explains it to him. He says, oh, okay, cool. So he played with Shador his last couple of years, 7-on-7 in high school. And he's just an average quarterback. I don't know if he'll ever play a meaningful snap in college football, but he was at Jackson State. He's still at Jackson State. But the point of that story is he didn't have to do that. Nobody would know. Nobody would care. That's the kind of dude he is. Like, this dude is being screwed. It's not his fault. Let me give him an opportunity to do what he is supposed to do. And whatever he do with the opportunity is whatever he do with it. But Shador and Gunner were cool last year. And Gunner helped him quite a bit in terms of just on the sideline. Hey, I know you see this, dog, but I see this. If it help you, 2 thumbs up. If it don't, well, I try.
Yeah.
But again, there's stories like that made me go to him and say, dog, you're doing some good work around here, man. And I would tell him, and he'd be like, oh, really? Because remember, this is people's impression of him. This is not him talking about himself. And it's like me, or it's like you, real talk. You don't know whose life you touched by something you did for them or something you didn't or something, you just going out of your way doing whatever.
Yeah.
I once had a boss and she worked at the morning news and then she was at ESPN and she said something. She said, I've always liked you because one day I was getting chastised in the office and you stepped up right after and said, hey, don't worry about it, blah, 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 blah. Now, let me ask you, dog, you think I remember that? No, I was just doing at the moment what I thought needed to be done. And I ain't thought about it before. I ain't thought about it since. And when she said it, I didn't remember it. But it's like when you give your kids a spanking. They might remember it. You might not remember it. Why? Because it had an effect on them. And for you, it was just going about your daily business. Now, we're not saying you abused them kids like Adrian Peterson. We're talking about just a couple taps of correction.
Right. Understood. Man, this has been great. But before I let you go, just want to kind of like bring it into the present and really into the future. So you've established Deion ain't going to the NFL, dead that now. But given how long you've known him and how well you know him, given what you saw him building at Jackson State from the inside, what do you think about, just broadly, take it wherever you want to go with the time we got left, broadly about where the Colorado experience is so far, all the attention, all the networks that have descended on Boulder, all the money he's made for a hell of a lot of people, this 4-2 start as we sit here now. What do you think about what he's done so far and where he can take this thing at Colorado?
What he's done still so far is just, I mean, it's really phenomenal, man. I knew Colorado would win eventually. I didn't think it'd be this fast in terms of being competitive, you know, because I was talking to him in the offseason. It was like you would expect. We got skilled guys. We hope our linemen can hold up. But the attention to the program, and I was talking to somebody the other day who says the thing that you can't replicate ever is just the energy that Deion brings to a situation. It's just pure energy, and there's no way to replicate it. You just feed off of it, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so Colorado, to me, is going to be the next big thing. They're going to be able to recruit. Who don't want to play for Deion? And in this era where every coach you know is doing what, man? Closing the program. I don't want you talking to our players without my permission. I don't want you saying anything. And they just treat it like it's state secrets and it's war, and it's really football. And so when he opens up the program and he says, hey, we're going to put social media on the back of the jersey, so if you want to hit our players up, you know how to find them. And the fact that his program is open. And why is it open, dog? In terms of all the cameras and all the videos they put out. Each one is a recruiting pitch. Hey, here's how we handle adversity when we lose to USC. Here's how we handle adversity when we get our butts kicked by Oregon. Here's how we handle upset win over TCU. Here's how we handle a narrow win. Here's how I discipline players. Here's how I discipline our team when I don't think they've acted right. Here's how I talk about God in front of our team. Here's how I teach our team how to be successful in life. As a parent, you look at that and you go, as a kid, you look at that. Because he got, you know, you got some of these coaches, hey, Michael, I don't know about this Twitter finger thing, this, what do you call it? IGIK thing. I don't fool with that. Okay, where the kids hanging at, man? They're hanging on IG. They're hanging on Instagram. Where's Deion and his 2.9 million followers? They're on Instagram. I guarantee you right now, if I send my son a text and he doesn't answer, and I really need to talk to him, I guarantee you I can send him a DM on IG and say, hey, call me ASAP. And my phone will ring in a couple minutes. He's 19. That's where he hang out. Now, he'll answer a text, but if you're on Reels or something, you might not see the text. You'll see the DM coming. So Deion is where the kids are. The kids are where Deion is. It's a perfect fit. Plus, you can meet your favorite rapper while you at school, taking care of business in the classroom and trying to win football games.
He changing the game. Every other coach trying to get in living rooms, Deion is on your phone. He ain't got to go to your house. He's already in your house 24/7.
And that, to me, is why there seems to be so much anger from these other coaches. Like, they're not just giving, you know, Dan Lanning, he's not just giving a speech to fire up his team. He's genuinely upset that I think I might have to change and adapt because the way Deion is doing things, I'm going to have to do something because it's different and it's working. I can't let him have all the players. I got to figure out how to get a few for myself.
Hey, man. Jean-Jacques Taylor, nothing but respect, brother. Congratulations on the book. Pick this book up. Once again, it is called Coach Prime, Deion Sanders and the Making of Men by Jean-Jacques Taylor, the president of the JJT Media Group. My main man, 100 grand. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much.
Dog, I appreciate you. And I want you to know, I know you done mocked me with that hair for the last hour, but it's all right.
Listen, man, you're a gifted reporter. I got a hairline.
Wavy is thick.
You're an amazing reporter, and I got a tight hairline. You know, we all get different gifts. Appreciate you, man. Take it easy.
All right, brother. Take care.
Hey, thanks so much for kicking it with your main man, Michael Smith. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Rate it, review it, tell your friends about it. Oh, and be sure to follow me on social media.